If you ever mistake a Terran's kindness for weakness, pray you never become the reason they stop smiling. Those words were engraved beneath the entrance of the Galactic Museum of Sentient Life, but almost nobody paid attention anymore. Visitors laughed, snapped pictures, and hurried toward the newest attraction instead. This year's Interstellar Biological Exhibition had gathered hundreds of species from across known space, each competing for titles ranging from most resilient to most intelligent, most beautiful, and even most mysterious. The longest line, however, stretched toward a simple glass pavilion labeled with one cheerful word: Terran. Seriously? A young Varelian child chirped as her parents lifted her onto their shoulders. That's a human? Apparently, her father answered, folding two of his forearms. They're supposed to be adorable. Inside the pavilion, Daniel Carter shifted awkwardly in his chair and gave the crowd an embarrassed smile. At 34 years old, with short brown hair, fair skin, blue eyes, and the relaxed posture of someone who had spent years working search and rescue back on Earth, he looked nothing like the terrifying legends whispered in old military archives. He wore faded blue jeans, well-worn hiking boots, and a gray Terran Alliance jacket that had seen better days. In his hands rested a paper cup filled with black coffee. "Do I really have to sit here all day?" Daniel asked with a grin. Dr. Selena Brooks glanced up from her tablet and laughed. "You volunteered." "I volunteered to represent humanity." Daniel looked around at the crowd gathering outside the transparent walls. "Nobody mentioned I'd be part of the petting zoo." Selena covered her mouth to hide another laugh. "Relax. They're fascinated." That was putting it lightly. Every few minutes another delegation entered, staring at Daniel with open curiosity. Children waved at him. Elderly diplomats whispered about how surprisingly small humans were. A group of towering insectoid tourists debated whether Terrans evolved specifically to trigger protective instincts in larger species. One elderly scholar adjusted his translator before announcing loudly, "Observe the symmetrical facial proportions. Forward-facing eyes without aggressive cranial horns. Rounded cheeks. Relaxed vocal frequencies. Extraordinary." Daniel blinked. "Did he just call my cheeks extraordinary?" Selena shrugged. "Take the compliment." A tiny alien girl, barely reaching Daniel's waist, slowly stepped closer while clutching a stuffed toy shaped suspiciously like a human. "Excuse me," she whispered. Daniel crouched until they were eye level. "Hey there." She hesitated before holding out a colorful flower made from folded crystal leaves. "For you." Daniel accepted it with both hands. "Thank you. This is beautiful." Her face lit up. Around them, dozens of cameras flashed at once. The crowd collectively sighed with delight. "See," someone whispered. "They're unbelievably gentle. No wonder everyone likes Terrans. They even lower themselves to a child's height." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck as applause broke out over something he considered completely normal. He glanced toward Selena. "I literally just said thank you." "Welcome to interstellar anthropology," she replied. "Congratulations. You've become scientific evidence." High above the exhibition floor, behind reinforced observation glass overlooking the entire hall, Admiral Zerith watched the applause without smiling. His dark uniform remained perfectly pressed as military reports floated across the display beside him. An intelligence officer cleared her throat. "Sir, public approval of Terrans has increased another 12% this morning alone." Zerith never looked away from Daniel. "That is precisely what concerns me." "Because they are becoming influential?" No, his voice stayed calm. "Because history has taught me one thing." He zoomed in on Daniel, accepting the flower with a warm smile. "The most dangerous predators are rarely the ones trying to look frightening." Daniel expected the attention to fade once the exhibition ended. Instead, it only grew stronger. By the second morning, invitations poured in from every corner of the station. Schools wanted him to meet students. Engineers wanted his opinion on human problem solving. Restaurant owners insisted he sample local dishes because, according to one delighted chef, humans made the most entertaining food critics in the galaxy. Daniel leaned against the observation rail overlooking the central promenade, sipping another cup of black coffee while Selena scanned the day's schedule. "Tell me that is the last event," Daniel said. Selena smiled without looking up. "Not even close. You have lunch with the Medical Academy, an interview with Galactic News, then a children's science fair." Daniel let out a long breath. "I used to spend my weekends pulling hikers out of canyons in Colorado. Somehow that felt simpler." You are doing fine. I am signing plush toys. She reached into her bag and tossed him a small package. Daniel caught it with one hand and stared at the contents. It was a miniature doll wearing a tiny Terran Alliance jacket. Please tell me that is not me. Selena bit her lip to stop herself from laughing. It sold out in 4 hours. Before Daniel could answer, a familiar voice called from across the promenade. Mr. Daniel. The little Varelian girl from the previous day hurried toward him, carefully carrying a small container almost as large as her own body. Her parents followed several steps behind, smiling apologetically. We baked these for you, the girl's mother said. Well, our version of baked. Daniel accepted the container carefully. Inside sat colorful pastries, shaped like stars. These look amazing. The little girl looked up at him with wide eyes. Mama says humans always share food with friends. Daniel opened the container, picked one pastry, and handed the rest back. Then your mom is right. We should all share. Within seconds, the nearby crowd joined in, laughing as Daniel passed pastries around complete strangers. A maintenance worker accepted one. A security officer accepted another. Even a pair of nervous journalists stopped recording long enough to taste them. High above, Admiral Zerith watched the gathering through the station's surveillance grid. Explain this, he said quietly. His intelligence officer enlarged the image. The Terran has formed social connections with 23 different species in less than 36 hours. Without negotiation. Correct. Without trade agreements. Correct. Without offering technology or military support. The officer hesitated. Also correct. Zerith narrowed his eyes. Interesting. He had spent decades studying civilizations that conquered through fear, wealth, or superior weapons. Humanity seemed to ignore every known formula. They simply walked into a room, and somehow people wanted to stand beside them. That did not make sense. Nothing that influential should look so ordinary. Suddenly, the station lights flickered once before returning to normal. Conversations paused. A soft chime echoed across the promenade. Attention, the automated voice announced. Temporary systems interruption. Please remain calm. Daniel looked up instinctively. Years of rescue work had trained him to notice details other people ignored. A delivery drone drifted sideways before correcting itself. An overhead tram stopped for exactly 3 seconds. Then everything resumed as if nothing had happened. Around him, the crowd relaxed immediately. Daniel did not. He quietly set down his coffee. Selena. She turned. What is it? Did you feel that? Feel what? Daniel watched another maintenance drone hesitate in midair before continuing its route. Nothing is wrong yet, he said softly. But something is definitely off. 3 levels above them, Admiral Zerith received an encrypted notification that erased every trace of calm from his face. The message contained only 7 words. Restricted archive access detected. Terran war records have been opened. Admiral Zerith stared at the encrypted notification for several long seconds before speaking. Who authorized access? The intelligence officer swallowed. No authorization code was submitted, sir. Someone bypassed every clearance level. Impossible. That is what the system reported. Zerith turned toward the sealed security vault overlooking the exhibition complex. Lock the archive. Disconnect every external network. I want the identity of whoever opened those files. Already attempted, sir. The officer hesitated. The archive is offline. For the first time in years, Zerith felt something unfamiliar. Not fear. Unease. Deep beneath the administrative wing of the station rested the historical conflict repository, a database so heavily restricted that most council members believed it contained nothing more than ancient navigation charts and obsolete diplomatic records. In reality, it held classified reports collected over 4 centuries from civilizations that had encountered humanity long before Earth officially joined the Galactic Council. Most of those reports had never been released because they contradicted the peaceful public image everyone now celebrated. A holographic screen flickered to life. File 1. Civilian Evacuation Incident. Zerith expected battlefield footage. Instead, he watched a grainy recording from a collapsing mining colony. Smoke drifted across damaged corridors while emergency alarms echoed in the background. Human volunteers moved from door to door, carrying frightened families toward rescue transports. There were no medals, no television cameras, no speeches. One line from the official report appeared beneath the recording. Terran personnel refused evacuation until every registered resident had departed. Zerith frowned. Continue. File 2. Winter Relief Operation. A frozen settlement buried beneath several feet of snow appeared on the screen. Human rescue workers pulled strangers from damaged homes, wrapped children in blankets, shared their own food, then quietly disappeared before reporters arrived. Another line appeared. Mission completed with zero compensation requested. Zerith folded his hands behind his back. These are not military records. No, sir, the officer replied softly. They are all civilian archives. Then why classify them? The officer opened another file. That is what concerns us. File 3. First Contact Disaster Response. The recording showed an alien transport stranded after a reactor malfunction. Human mechanics climbed through narrow maintenance shafts for nearly 6 hours before restoring power. According to the report, none of them asked what species had been aboard until the work was finished. Zerith remained silent. Every civilization he had studied acted according to predictable incentives. Wealth, territory, status, survival. Humanity seemed to operate under a completely different logic. Across the station, Daniel and Selena continued walking toward the medical academy, unaware that decades of classified history were unfolding several levels above them. Daniel slowed near a maintenance access panel where 2 station engineers argued over a malfunctioning service robot. What happened, he asked. One engineer sighed. Navigation processor froze again. We have been chasing random failures all morning. Daniel knelt beside the machine without waiting to be invited. He studied the wiring for less than a minute before smiling. Mind if I try something? The engineers exchanged uncertain looks before stepping aside. Daniel gently disconnected one cable, cleaned a small contact with the corner of his handkerchief, secured it again, and pressed the restart switch. The little machine beeped happily before rolling forward as if nothing had happened. One engineer blinked. That fixed it. Daniel shrugged. Loose connection. Sometimes machines just need someone patient enough to look. The surrounding crowd applauded again. Daniel laughed awkwardly. Please do not clap. I barely did anything. High above, another classified document opened by itself. Unlike the earlier reports, this one displayed a crimson warning across the top. Psychological assessment. Do not distribute. Zerith's expression hardened as the first sentence appeared on the screen. Humanity's greatest strategic advantage has never been its technology, its economy, or its military capability. It is the instinctive trust they create before anyone realizes they are changing the outcome of everything around them. Daniel had barely taken 3 steps away from the repaired maintenance robot when every light in the medical academy corridor flashed crimson. A sharp alarm echoed through the station, followed by a calm, automated voice that somehow made the situation feel even more serious. Attention! Transit Ring 7 has entered emergency lockdown. Please remain where you are. The cheerful conversations around him stopped instantly. Visitors looked at one another, confused rather than frightened. Selena frowned at her tablet as the screen went black. I just lost the station network. Daniel slowly scanned the corridor instead of the displays. His rescue instincts had never relied on electronics. They relied on people. He noticed a young mother clutching 2 frightened children, an elderly delegate trying to stand from a bench, 3 medical interns frozen in place, unsure whether to run or wait. Selena, Daniel said quietly, where does this hallway connect? She pointed toward a large set of security doors. Emergency Transit Hub. What? Before he could answer, the station floor vibrated beneath their feet. Not a violent jolt, just enough to make hanging lights sway gently overhead. Several people gasped. One child started crying. A freight cart, left unattended near the wall, slowly rolled across the polished floor toward the crowd. Daniel moved without thinking. He stepped forward, caught the heavy cart with both hands before it gathered speed, and guided it safely against the wall. Everybody is fine, he called with a calm smile. Take a deep breath. Nobody rushes. His voice was steady enough that people instinctively listened. The frightened mother exhaled first. Then the children stopped crying. The medical interns immediately began helping nearby visitors instead of staring at the flashing lights. Selena watched the change with quiet amazement. Daniel had not issued orders. He had simply acted as though everything was manageable, and somehow everyone else believed him. At the opposite end of the corridor, Two station security officers sprinted toward the sealed transit doors. One of them hit the emergency control panel repeatedly. Nothing happened. Control room is not responding, the officer muttered. The lock system is frozen. Daniel walked over. Can I take a look? The officer recognized him from the exhibition. This is station security business. Daniel nodded politely. Understood. I spent 12 years in search and rescue back home. Sometimes these systems fail in simple ways. The officer hesitated before stepping aside. Daniel studied the panel for only a few seconds. Your backup battery is working, he said. Listen. Everyone became quiet. Beneath the alarm, a faint electrical hum continued inside the wall. Daniel pointed toward a manual release handle hidden behind a safety cover. The computer locked itself. The mechanical override did not. The officer pulled the handle. With a deep metallic sound, the massive doors slid open. Cheers erupted through the hallway. Visitors immediately began moving toward the evacuation route in an orderly line instead of pushing forward. Daniel smiled at the officer. Sometimes old engineering still saves the day. 3 floors above, Admiral Zerith watched the entire incident through surveillance feeds. Not once had Daniel identified himself as a hero. Not once had he demanded authority. Yet within less than 3 minutes, frightened civilians, trained security personnel, and even medical staff had unconsciously begun following his lead. Zerith folded his arms. He just stabilized a crowd without issuing a single command. His intelligence officer quietly nodded. It keeps happening, sir. Before Zerith could answer, another alert appeared across every monitor in the command center. Unauthorized access complete. Historical archive Delta unlocked. Military observation file requested. Classification level, impossible. The screen dimmed before displaying a single name that had not been opened in 118 years. General Marcus Hale. The name lingered in the command center like a forgotten warning. General Marcus Hale. Every officer in the room recognized it, even if only from rumors buried beneath generations of classified history. Admiral Zerith stared at the glowing file without touching it. I was told Hale retired decades ago, he said quietly. His intelligence officer nodded. He did. He has refused every interview, every military ceremony, and every council request since then. So why would someone unlock his file now? Nobody answered. Zerith finally placed his hand over the authorization panel. Open it. The room darkened as an old recording slowly came into focus. The image quality was rough, clearly captured long before modern holographic systems. An older man with silver hair stood on the porch of a quiet farmhouse somewhere on Earth. He wore faded jeans, a worn brown jacket, and held a mug of coffee while watching the sunrise over rolling hills. There were no medals on display, no guards, no signs that this quiet grandfather had once commanded fleets capable of changing the course of history. An interviewer asked the first question. General Hale, historians still debate why humanity succeeded in conflicts against stronger civilizations. Was it better technology? Marcus smiled and shook his head. No. Superior strategy? Sometimes. Then what made the difference? Marcus looked toward the horizon before answering. People always assume humans become dangerous when they are angry. That is the biggest misunderstanding in the galaxy. The interviewer leaned forward. Then when are they dangerous? Marcus chuckled softly. When they decide someone else matters more than they do. The recording paused automatically. Silence filled the command center. Zerith replayed that final sentence twice before speaking. Continue. Another series of archived reports appeared. None described glorious victories. Instead, they documented ordinary moments. Human firefighters refusing to leave a damaged building until every resident was accounted for. Rescue crews working through storms after every automated drone had been recalled. Doctors volunteering in disease outbreaks long after emergency funding ended. School teachers staying overnight with frightened children during evacuations. Again and again the reports reached the same conclusion. Human behavior became increasingly effective whenever another life depended on them. Zerith slowly exhaled. This is not military doctrine. No, sir, the officer answered. It appears to be cultural behavior. Across the station, Daniel and Selena finally reached the medical academy after emergency systems returned to normal. The building buzzed with relieved conversations. A young physician approached Daniel with an embarrassed smile. Mr. Carter, I wanted to thank you. My interns told me what happened in the hallway. Daniel waved a hand dismissively. The security officers opened the doors. I just noticed the manual release. Most people never would have looked. Daniel laughed. My dad always said if something breaks, check the simple stuff before blaming the complicated stuff. Several nearby students quietly wrote that sentence into their tablets. Daniel noticed and blinked. Please do not quote me. My father would think that was hilarious. The room filled with warm laughter. Selena leaned closer and whispered, "You realize people keep treating everything you say like wisdom." Daniel groaned. That is honestly a little terrifying. Before Selena could answer, every communication screen inside the academy switched to emergency broadcast mode. A station administrator appeared, looking unusually tense. Attention, all civilian personnel. Due to an unidentified security concern, all transportation between sectors has been temporarily suspended. Please remain where you are until further notice. The room fell silent. Daniel looked through the large observation window toward the distant docking ring. Several ships that had been preparing to depart were now frozen in place. Something far bigger than a computer malfunction was unfolding. At that exact moment, Admiral Zerith received the final page of Marcus Hale's classified file. Across the top, in bold letters older than the modern council itself, were 12 words that made even the veteran commander sit perfectly still. Never force a Terran to choose between safety and someone they have decided to protect. Daniel remained by the observation window as transport traffic across the station ground to a complete halt. Cargo tugs floated motionless outside the docking ring, while maintenance crews gathered in confused clusters along the service platforms. Whatever had triggered the emergency was spreading far beyond one district. Selena folded her arms. I have a bad feeling about this. Daniel nodded. Me too. Before either of them could say another word, the academy doors slid open and 2 station security officers entered at a brisk pace. The taller officer approached Daniel directly. Mr. Carter? That is me. Admiral Zerith requests your presence immediately. Selena frowned. For what reason? The officer hesitated. He did not specify. Daniel exchanged a quick glance with Selena before smiling politely. Well, when an admiral asks nicely, I suppose I should not keep him waiting. They were escorted through corridors that had been nearly empty only minutes earlier. Security checkpoints had doubled. Patrol drones hovered silently above intersections. Technicians whispered as encrypted messages flashed across every wall display. Daniel noticed details that most visitors ignored. Several emergency exits had been manually unlocked. Medical response carts were stationed near elevators. Someone was preparing for a situation that had not yet happened. As they entered the command level, Admiral Zerith dismissed everyone except his intelligence officer. The room became unusually quiet. Daniel stepped inside with his hands in his jacket pockets. You wanted to see me? Zerith studied him carefully. Sit down, Mr. Carter. Daniel pulled out the chair and smiled. Usually when someone says that, I expect either good coffee or bad news. Zerith ignored the joke. What did you do before representing Earth? Search and rescue. Military. Never. Weapons training? Daniel shrugged. Basic emergency response courses. Wilderness survival. Rope rescue. Medical certification. Nothing exciting. Zerith tapped the table. Yet every incident on this station somehow ends with people following you. Daniel looked genuinely confused. I never asked anyone to. Exactly. Zerith leaned forward. That is what I am trying to understand. Daniel thought for a moment before answering. Back home, when something goes wrong, people are scared. If one person stays calm, others usually calm down too. That is not leadership. That is just being decent. The Admiral searched Daniel's face for signs of deception and found none. The man honestly believed his own explanation. Before Zerith could continue, the command room lights dimmed again. A sharp warning tone interrupted the conversation. Security breach detected in Cargo Sector 12, the station computer announced. Unauthorized vessel has entered restricted docking space. Every officer in the room turned toward the tactical display. A small transport shuttle had appeared inside the station using a maintenance corridor that should have been impossible to access. Identify the vessel, Zerith ordered. Negative, the operator replied. No registration beacon. No communication response. Another alert appeared. Multiple civilian groups were trapped near the cargo district because emergency bulkheads had sealed unexpectedly. Selena looked at the map. There are school tours down there. Daniel stood before anyone else moved. How many? Approximately 60 civilians, an officer answered. Daniel reached for his jacket. Then we should go. Zerith raised a hand. Station security will handle it. I hope they do, Daniel replied calmly. But frightened families do not need another armed officer shouting instructions. They need someone who will help them stay calm until your people arrive. Zerith watched him for another long second before making a decision that surprised even himself. Escort Mr. Carter to Sector 12. His intelligence officer stared in disbelief. Sir, Zerith never looked away from Daniel. I want to see whether the archives were right. I want to know what a Terran does when protecting strangers stops being a choice and becomes the only option. Cargo Sector 12 looked nothing like the polished exhibition halls that had welcomed visitors all week. Rows of towering freight containers stretched toward the ceiling while maintenance lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the loading platforms. Families, students, and station workers waited behind sealed emergency barriers, unsure whether to stay put or keep moving. The atmosphere was tense, but no one was panicking yet. Daniel stepped through the security checkpoint beside Selena and two officers. He immediately spotted the same little Varelian girl who had given him the crystal flower. She clutched her mother's hand, trying to act brave even though her eyes searched every corner of the room. The moment she noticed Daniel, she smiled. Mr. Daniel. Several frightened faces turned toward him at once. The mood changed almost instantly. Conversations became quieter. Shoulders relaxed. Daniel walked over and knelt beside the little girl again. Looks like we are having another unexpected adventure. She nodded nervously. Are we going to be okay? Daniel smiled with the same calm expression he had worn since arriving on the station. I think we are. We just need everybody to help each other. Behind him, Admiral Zerith watched through a live tactical feed. He had expected speeches or dramatic displays of courage. Instead, the Terrans simply spoke as if comforting neighbors after a power outage. Yet the effect was undeniable. People who had been frozen by uncertainty suddenly started helping each other. Parents organized children into small groups. Medical students checked on elderly visitors. Cargo workers cleared walkways without waiting for instructions. He never gives orders, one officer whispered. No, Zerith replied quietly. He gives people permission to believe everything will be all right. Before anyone could respond, another warning echoed through the cargo district. Unauthorized vessel has disconnected from docking bay 12. The tactical display zoomed in on a small shuttle moving deeper into the maintenance tunnels instead of escaping. They are still inside the station, an operations officer reported. Tracking signal lost again. Daniel looked toward a narrow service corridor where several maintenance robots had stopped moving. That hallway should not be empty, he said. One security officer frowned. How do you know? Because whoever entered wants us watching the wrong direction. The officer turned to his scanner, only to realize Daniel had been right. A secondary access door behind the civilian shelter had silently unlocked without triggering the primary alarms. Seal that corridor, the officer shouted into his communicator. The heavy blast doors began sliding shut, but a small maintenance vehicle suddenly rolled out from the passageway, completely unmanned. It coasted harmlessly into the center of the cargo floor before stopping. Every weapon in the room pointed toward it. Nothing happened. Daniel slowly walked forward despite the officers calling after him. He crouched beside the vehicle and noticed a small delivery crate strapped to the back. Taped to the top was a handwritten note in plain English. He read it once. Then his relaxed smile disappeared for the first time since arriving at the station. Selena stepped closer. Daniel, what does it say? He looked up slowly. It says, "We knew you would come because humans always do." Silence swept across the cargo bay. Admiral Zerith felt a chill run through him as the meaning settled in. This had never been a random security breach. Someone had spent enough time studying humanity to predict exactly how one ordinary Terran would respond. And if they understood Daniel that well, then this entire emergency had only been the opening move. Daniel folded the note and slipped it into his jacket pocket without another word. Around him, the security officers searched the maintenance vehicle from top to bottom, but it contained nothing except basic repair tools and a drained power cell. Whoever had sent it had wanted only one thing: a message. Admiral Zerith arrived in Cargo Sector 12 less than 5 minutes later. walking through the security cordon with the measured confidence of someone who refused to let uncertainty show on his face. He looked directly at Daniel. "May I see it?" Daniel handed him the folded note. Zerith read the sentence once, then again. "They knew you would respond." Daniel nodded. "Most humans would have." "No." Zerith slowly shook his head. "They specifically expected you." Before Daniel could answer, Selena pointed toward the maintenance vehicle. "Look." One of the engineers had removed the rear access panel, revealing a tiny projector hidden beneath the cargo platform. As soon as external power reached the device, a holographic image appeared above the vehicle. The room fell completely silent. An unidentified figure stood inside the recording, its features concealed beneath digital distortion. The voice was calm, almost conversational. This was never an attack. It was an experiment. Every security officer immediately reached for communication equipment, but Daniel quietly raised one hand. "Let it finish." The recording continued. "For decades, the Galactic Council has cataloged intelligence, technology, military capability, and economic influence. Yet they ignored the single variable that changes every equation: humanity." Zerith's expression remained unreadable. "Who are you?" The figure ignored the question. "The galaxy believes Terrans inspire trust because they are harmless." That assumption is incorrect. New images appeared around the speaker. They showed Daniel sharing food with strangers, repairing equipment, calming frightened children, opening emergency doors, and smiling at people whose names he did not even know. Every moment had been recorded from public security cameras during the previous 48 hours. "Observe the pattern," the voice continued. "No authority, no political office, no command rank. Yet cooperation increases wherever one ordinary Terran chooses to help." Selena whispered, almost to herself, "Someone has been studying him since the exhibition began." "Not him," Daniel replied softly. "Us." The final sequence displayed statistical models spreading across the hologram. Every simulation reached the same conclusion. Communities containing even a single cooperative human recovered from emergencies faster than comparable populations without one. Crime decreased. Volunteer activity increased. Cross-species trust improved. The anonymous speaker returned to the center of the display. Civilizations measure power through fear. Humanity spreads influence through something far more difficult to resist. People simply want to become better when a Terran believes they can. The hologram flickered before displaying one final sentence. "The strongest force in the universe is not intimidation. It is earned trust." Then the projection disappeared, leaving only silence behind. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Finally, Admiral Zerith folded the note and looked at Daniel with entirely different eyes than he had the day before. "All this time," he said quietly, "I believed humanity's greatest strength was hidden somewhere inside secret fleets or classified weapons." Daniel offered a small smile. "Sorry to disappoint you." Zerith almost smiled back. "You did the opposite." An operations officer suddenly rushed into the cargo bay carrying a freshly decoded transmission. "Admiral, we traced the unauthorized shuttle." "Where did it go?" The officer looked down at the report in disbelief. "Nowhere, sir. It belonged to a Council Behavioral Research Division that officially shut down 93 years ago." Selena frowned. "Then who activated it?" The officer slowly raised his eyes. "That is the problem. According to every record we have, nobody did. The launch command came from inside the Historical Conflict Repository itself." The words echoed through the cargo bay long after the operations officer stopped speaking. Nobody had launched the shuttle. Nobody had activated the experiment. The Historical Conflict Repository itself had triggered the sequence after recognizing a familiar pattern. Admiral Zerith looked toward the distant observation windows where thousands of visitors still wandered through the station, laughing, shopping, meeting strangers from worlds they had never imagined. "The archive was never protecting military secrets," he said quietly. "It was protecting an idea." Daniel tilted his head. "What kind of idea?" Zerith slowly handed the folded note back to him. "That the galaxy has misunderstood your people from the very beginning." Within the hour, station systems were fully restored. Engineers confirmed there had never been any sabotage. The emergency lockouts, the redirected shuttle, the hidden projector, and every archived message had been part of an automated behavioral study created generations earlier by council researchers who feared their own conclusions would be ignored. They had hidden the project instead of publishing it. Not because humanity was dangerous in the way everyone expected, but because its influence could not be measured with fleets, weapons, or political treaties. Later that afternoon, the Grand Assembly Hall filled once again. Representatives from hundreds of civilizations gathered beneath the towering glass dome where only 2 days earlier they had laughed at the quiet Terran sitting with a cup of coffee. This time the room felt different. There was no nervousness, no suspicion, only curiosity. Admiral Zerith stepped onto the central platform and looked across the chamber before speaking. For centuries, we ranked civilizations by military strength, technological advancement, territorial expansion, and economic power. We believe those measurements explained why great societies endured. He paused before turning toward Daniel, who stood quietly near the back of the room exactly where he preferred to be. We were wrong. A ripple of surprised whispers spread through the audience. Zerith continued. During the last 48 hours, one ordinary citizen of Earth repaired equipment, comforted frightened children, shared food with strangers, solved problems nobody asked him to solve, and repeatedly placed the well-being of complete strangers ahead of his own convenience. Daniel looked around awkwardly. I really do not think that sounds very special. Soft laughter filled the chamber. Zerith smiled for the first time since the exhibition began. That statement explains everything. He activated the central display. The old inscription from the museum appeared above every delegate in letters nearly 30 feet high. If you ever mistake a Terran's kindness for weakness, pray you never become the reason they stop smiling. Today, Zerith said, I finally understand those words. Humanity does not become extraordinary during a crisis. A crisis simply reveals what humanity has been all along. The chamber rose in quiet applause, not because a battle had been won, but because an old misunderstanding had finally ended. As the meeting concluded, the little Varelian girl hurried across the floor carrying another crystal flower. This one is for your home, she said. Daniel accepted it with the same warm smile he had worn from the beginning. Thank you. I will keep it on my kitchen table. So you remember us? She asked. Daniel gently nodded. People are always worth remembering. Years later, students across the galaxy would study the events of that week, expecting to learn about secret human technology or forgotten military victories. Instead, they found the story of an ordinary rescue worker who never realized history had been watching him. The final page of the revised Council Handbook contained only one sentence beneath humanity's official cultural assessment. The most remarkable thing about Terrans is not that they can survive impossible situations. It is that they never stop choosing kindness, even when nobody is watching. And somewhere in a quiet home on Earth, Daniel Carter placed a crystal flower beside his morning coffee, smiled to himself, and went back to living an ordinary life, never knowing that across the stars, countless people had started trying to become a little more human.